These were the superstars everyone wanted to be. Their music played on repeat across the country. The decade was a great time for country music in general, but behind those incredible songs, maybe not so much.
And it's the honeymoon's over, and so it is hard.
Infidelity during long tour schedules, unbearable scrutiny of their family in the limelight, courtroom battles, and family death. And while some of our favorite superstars were able to cope with their fame, many others were not and led far from happy lives.
You start getting kind of sweaty and you just love the way she smelled.
How does she smell?
She smells like nothing's impossible.
So come on, the show is starting as we go find out.
What happened?
You don't get much more country than George Strait.
Beat up leather bag.
He's one of those guys that can knock out hit after hit while still maintaining his artistic integrity.
Holding on.
With 60 #1 hits, you hear that? 60. Yes, that's combining the number of songs that topped the Billboard chart 44 with the 16 that topped the media base chart.
Like Jesse James.
The guy has shown he could write and perform songs so good they'd appeal to just about anybody.
The way we are right now.
But he's also never sold out and made glitzy pop country, or at least I don't think he has. But while the George Strait story you probably know includes all his wildest successes, there is another side to him you probably aren't familiar with, as his career and life has been much more difficult and dramatic than you may expect. So troubling at times that George has quit music on 3 separate occasions, from hundreds of rejections to awful car wrecks. George has endured biblical levels of personal tragedy, and several times he's considered giving it all up forever.
We just had to try.
So let's look at a courageous, talented guy battling dozens of demons.
Threw 'em into a pile.
Who will ultimately win? Let's dive into the secrets about the man behind the songs you know and love, finding out the pain that lies behind.
A broken hello.
But before we begin, remember to give this video a thumbs up to show support for us and George. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss out on videos like this.
Back to you.
We're gonna
Give it all we got tonight.
So let's go find out.
What happened?
The Nashville Grind. Strait had earned a reputation for being one of the most innovative and exciting live performers in music, period. He used new techniques like 360-degree performances to captivate audiences worldwide. The guy's been playing arenas so long that it seems like it's impossible to quit. But the truth is always much more complicated. In fact, George has actually quit music completely multiple times. So what tragedies led George to the brink of giving up his passion? And what happened most recently to make George put the guitar down? Even before he made a name for himself, George had been a principled musician. He knew it was important to hold his ground and not to cash out with commercial pop country. But to truly stick to country roots, George knew he couldn't play with just any flashy session guitarists. So when he was just a smooth-faced kid at Southwest Texas State, he auditioned to sing in a band of ragtag kids who knew how to rip some country songs. The band was called Ace in the Hole, and they played shows all over with George as a frontman, beginning to make a name for themselves. But George knew it was time for him to take the leap. He moved to Nashville in hopes of making it big. But record execs didn't want to hear the music George was currently making. It was too rough and too genuine. They only wanted to hear sanitized, pop-friendly records to sell and sell. It got to the point where George was ready to quit music.
'Cause I've got a problem.
And he accepted a job designing cattle pens. His dreams of doing what he loved and sharing his music with the world seemed to have died. That is, until what happened next. Support system. George's wife, Norma, had supported George's dreams for years. Ever since high school, she supported him, moving around the country and dealing with a penniless life. But she knew the two of them had invested enough sweat and tears that giving up was just not an option. So she sat him down and convinced him to keep trying for just one more year. One more year, she said, and if nothing happened, George could spend the rest of his life designing cattle pens if that's what he wanted, and Norma would be plenty okay with it. She wanted him to give one more year, if not for him, then for her. And at her request, George continued the grind, reuniting with Ace in the Hole and touring extensively. Well, the extra effort paid off, and George Strait landed a record deal in 1981. And boy, did he know who he wanted as his backing band. Ace in the Hole would support him over the next 3 decades, thick and thin. Well, that is until everything changed. A farewell tour. On September 26, 2012, George Strait announced he was retiring from touring. Constant travel and performance was wearing him out, and he knew he wanted to spend more time with his family. So he planned a massive tour called the Cowboy Rides Again Tour, and it was a massive success.
I used to sit beside every new hay.
Earning rave reviews in major publications and delighting fans. It set records all over, including the largest gross at a single-show country concert,
That I can't play.
which was over $18 million, and the largest indoor concert ever with over 104,000 people attending. Heck, George was putting up better numbers than the Pope. But what really made the tour special for George was who he was playing with. Ace in the Hole, of course. The group of honest, hard-working musicians who had backed him for more than 30 years. And he wouldn't have anybody else do it. If the Cowboy Rides Again tour was a true farewell tour, does that mean he's done for good? Is the king of country really stepping down from his throne? The answer is a bit complicated. George has made good on his promise not to tour anymore, and he actually hasn't spent much time in the studio either. George hasn't totally quit making music, but it seems more like a hobby than a passion for him now.
Edgy and dragging.
His most recent release was in 2018 when he put out a promotional song to promote a brand of tequila he'd invested in.
I'm talking about Cody Gold.
But even if George has more interest in tequila than music nowadays, I think he's given us enough hits for a lifetime.
Get halfway through town.
I say he's earned the right to sip a cocktail or two. Remember earlier when I said George has quit music multiple times?
Hard to get through.
Well, there was actually a third time, right in the prime of his career, when George seriously considered calling it quits forever. But this time the reason wasn't just rejection or fatigue. It was something much more powerful and shocking. The story of Jennifer Strait. The year was 1972, and George had recently married his high school sweetheart. While stationed on an Air Force base in Hawaii, the two had a daughter named Jennifer, and she was the light of George's life as he attempted to juggle military service with a musical career. What got him through were the people he was working so hard for. As George began to receive mainstream success, Jennifer grew up. In 1986, she was 13, and George had just knocked out a string of more than a dozen #1 hits, and was receiving acclaim for almost single-handedly bringing country back to its roots. Everything was perfect. Until one night, he got a devastating phone call. Jennifer had gone out for the evening with a few friends. George didn't ask who. Unbeknownst to George, Jennifer was with a large group of kids, led by a reckless older boy of 18. The kid was driving his Ford Mustang and showing off by driving real fast and not slowing around corners. Boy, what were the passengers thinking? Being whipped around cacti, wanting to say slow down, but not wanting to be a killjoy. The older boy pushed his luck and whipped around a corner so fast the car flipped. Jennifer Strait, sitting in the passenger seat, was not wearing a seatbelt. She was ejected from the vehicle and killed almost instantly. The driver and other passengers all survived. And just as George's hard work was paying off, and his life taking shape finally with his wife and daughter he adored, he was struck by a tragedy so decimating that most people can't even fathom it. Of course, he could have quit country music or could have buried himself in his career. Did he do either of the polar opposites? What did George do? Redemption. George didn't choose either polar choice. The accident helped remind him what really mattered, and he decided to cut off most of his contact with the media and spend time with just his family. But he decided to not quit music, as it was a way for him to process the immense pain, and he knew he had to provide for his family. So even in this difficult time, to say the least, George pumped out classic after classic, releasing 11 straight #1 hits. In the meantime, processing such a tragedy was made even more difficult to bear because of the ongoing legal battles that emerged over how to punish the driver of the doomed Mustang. First, he was indicted on involuntary manslaughter, but then the charge was lessened to a misdemeanor. Then he was charged with criminally negligent homicide. 3 different juries were convened in the controversial case. It must have been insanely frustrating to watch the guy who killed your daughter constantly slip away from charges. But George didn't get caught up in retribution. Instead, he channeled his pain into charity, the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation, which I think speaks to what kind of man George Strait is. When beset by tragedy, he coped by putting faith in 2 things: good works and good music. And that's why George Strait is known for being a devoted family man and a principled artist. Heck, a man of the people. I don't think there's anybody out there who would say he doesn't deserve what he's earned. But as we've seen, the universe doesn't always see it that way. And although George isn't making much music nowadays, I'm still hoping for something new to drop. But even if it doesn't, then hey, I guess he's earned an easy retirement. There is a George Strait song for just about any occasion. Now I know not everybody loves the CMA Awards. People love to complain that they're too flashy, too commercial, you know.
There are cars there,
And yeah, there is a nugget of truth to their complaints.
What?
But despite all that, there is still a special place in my heart for the CMA Awards. Because it's really heartening to see that there's still one night a year where country music gets its due. But sometimes the night isn't always just great music and perfect vibes. Once in a blue moon, something insane happens. So today I'm taking you on a journey to the 2016 CMA Awards. Because something truly incredible happened that night, but you may not have heard about it. So we have unearthed a fantastic story, and it has to do with one of the greats, Alan Jackson, one of the most popular, Beyonce, and one of the most controversial, the Dixie Chicks. The whole thing involves glitzy celebrities, TV drama, and censorship. But before we dive in, please give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind. So kick your feet up and get comfortable, because we're gonna find out.
Let's go.
What happened? 1994. Okay, it's 94, and Alan was initially excited for the opportunity to share his music with millions of people. He and his band practiced for hours, making sure their chops were airtight. But then the producers of the show sent him a memo, saying that Alan's band wouldn't actually be able to play on stage with him. Instead, they would mime their performance. And Alan would play to a measly backing track. Now I'm sure plenty of pop stars would have no problem with this arrangement. It allows the singer to be the center of attention. But as I just said, Alan wasn't raised like that, and as a real country musician who supports his band, it sure did infuriate him that his art was being compromised for TV and showmanship. But what could he do? He couldn't cancel the performance. So Alan Jackson devised a plan. He decided to have his musicians go along with the request at first. But then at the last minute, he told his drummer to drum, but without the drumsticks. Seriously, you can see it in the video. And it's obvious to anyone that's watching that Alan Jackson is shoving it in the face of those greedy, conniving sons of guns. But of course, Alan and the CMA Awards were not finished. The people in charge wanted revenge, and so did Alan. So a few years passed, and in 1999, Alan Jackson clashed with the CMA Awards once more. 1999. The 99 CMA Awards were intended to be special. Why? Because country legend George Jones was supposed to take the stage. Alan Jackson, yes, grew up on George's music and was enthralled to be also performing. But of course, things are never so simple. And right before the show, there was yet another little message from the suits. But this time to George, saying that George Jones wouldn't be able to play any of his songs in full. But instead, he had to play abbreviated versions, a short little sample that would be more palatable to mainstream audiences. Or so they said.
Now that's a lot of damage!
But it's pretty much the same dilemma that Alan had in 1995. Yes, you can have your principle and all, but you're really just letting the bigwigs win in some way, right? So Alan Jackson stepped in, and when he heard that George was being forced to pull out, he decided to stick it to them once more. Just watch what happens here halfway through Alan's performance of his song.
Got time now for one more round. Set up my friend.
That's right, he plays tribute to old George with a stunning rendition of the song George was supposed to play, his comeback hit Choices. And George and Alan's rebellion against the CMA Awards also had real-world impact because they exposed corruption at the failing CMA Awards. But you know, that's a story for another day.
Okay.
Because Alan vs. the CMA Awards is not over yet. We have one more round in 2016. Would Alan Jackson once more land a painful blow at the glitzy award show? Or would the award show have the last laugh? Beyonce and the CMA Awards. Alright, so it's 2016, a pretty crazy year in America. But it seemed to be business as usual at the CMA Awards. And Alan Jackson was planning to attend. But who knows if the TV execs were gonna throw some more BS at him. But then an unexpected performer took the stage. Yeah, that's right.
Who?
Beyonce. I don't think I need to explain who she is. The world's biggest pop star. Famous for both her slick pop music and her classic R&B group. And Beyonce wasn't alone. She was backed by the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, along with a sizable brass and bluegrass band. And Beyonce sang a boisterous and ambitious rendition of her recent song, Daddy Lessons. Now, Alan Jackson had no scheme prepared and had a comfortable seat in the front row. So what did Alan do, a renowned country music traditionalist and purist, when the poppiest pop star in recorded history took the stage? Well, he had seen enough, I guess, because he walked out, smack dab in the middle of Beyonce's performance. But that wasn't even the whole story. The craziest part was the aftermath. The fallout. Okay, so what happened next?
Nani?
Well, the CMA Awards tried to keep that walkout out of the press. Executives scrubbed much of the footage of the event. And because of this effort, Alan's dramatic exit went unnoticed by much of the press. But as it turns out, Alan Jackson wasn't the only person with strong feelings about Beyonce's appearance at the CMA Awards. And some country music stars were outraged that the beloved genre decided to showcase an alternative approach. Some just hated the performance outright. Popular singer Travis Tritt was one of these unimpressed musicians. But of course, some fans defended the performance, saying that while it didn't align with mainstream trends in country music, it called back to some of the genre's more rootsier origins. They said that Beyonce, who had some family ties to the South and its music, respectfully incorporated elements of the genre into her own lexicon. One group that shared this opinion was, of course, the chicks, who were disgusted by the backlash that Beyoncé received. As people expressed their opinions, the controversy grew more and more heated, with people from both sides responding to each other. In some cases, misunderstandings were blown out of proportion. Take Kenny Chesney, who was recorded in the audience giving what seemed to be a pained face during the performance. Now he was of course accused of disrespecting Beyoncé, to the point where he came out and said that fans were interpreting his facial expressions wrong. And he admitted that he was actually enjoying the show. Well, at the end of the day, both sides calmed down. And ironically, Alan Jackson, who kind of sparked the whole debate, and had the most energetic and public negative response to the performance, while he received basically no backlash for his actions. So that is the story of how Alan Jackson has battled the CMA Awards multiple times. And honestly, I don't know if it will be his last. But now we want to know what you think. Do you think it was okay that Alan Jackson got up in the middle of Beyoncé's performance? Do you remember that performance itself? What is the best CMA Awards show performance you can recall? Get in the comments and tell me all that and your favorite Alan Jackson song.
When the world stopped turning that September day.
And before you walk out during this performance, please give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind. Subscribe to our channel and come back often so we can keep telling you.
Remember when?
What happened? She has sold over 1 million records, making her the best-selling female artist in country music history, as well as one of the most successful musicians of all time in any genre. Yep, you guessed it, we're talking about Shania Twain. Don't turn me away. Born in Ontario, Canada, Shania went to Nashville to become the most iconic female singer country music has ever seen. Okay, Dolly, I hear you. Dolly, I hear you.
Here's Johnny.
But Shania Twain is awesome.
Let's go.
The Queen of Country Pop is the only female artist in history to have 3 consecutive albums certified diamond.
That teaches every little boy and girl.
Yup, that does impress me much. But more than the numbers she put up on the board,
Look how far we've come, my baby.
I love Shania Twain for her personality. Cause when you hear one of her hits, you don't just think, hey, that's a catchy song.
Guys who think they're on my tail.
You really hear her soul come through the words. But how much of that is the real Shania Twain?
Me deep inside.
The woman behind the music has led a much more complex and fascinating life than you could possibly imagine. So, if you're wondering why did Shania quit music, what horrible tragedy made her withdraw from the public eye, and most importantly, where in the world is she today? Well, have no fear because we're answering these questions and more.
Nice.
From twisted, messy relationships to mysterious diseases, let's go learn a little more about Shania Twain.
Okay.
Before we begin, please hit the thumbs up icon if you enjoy our video, and subscribe to the channel for more bios like this. But I can hear the music playing, so let's go find out.
Right now.
What happened? A mysterious curse. In 2004, it seemed like Shania was on top of the world. She had just released her greatest hits album, along with a few new singles. But fans all over the world were shocked to hear that she would be no longer recording music or performing. Out of nowhere, it seemed she was done for good. Maybe her heart wasn't in it anymore, fans speculated. And everyone in the biz was sad to see such a vivacious, talented woman go mute.
Even my skin is acting weird.
But it was her choice, right? Well, not so fast, because behind the scenes, things weren't so simple. In fact, they were so hard to understand at the time that Shania's life seemed more magical than realistic. Here's what happened from Shania's perspective. Imagine, if you will, that somebody puts a curse on you, and from the second you get out of bed, everything just goes wrong. Your performance suffers at work, your personal life becomes a mess, and on top of that, you start feeling physically awful. You have no idea what's happening, there's simply no explanation. Every time she tried to perform, she felt dizzy and almost fell off the stage. Even worse, her most important possession, her voice, was gone. She couldn't even call out to her dog across the room, let alone perform for millions of fans. So what the heck happened? A singer with no song. Shania Twain went to doctor after doctor and pleaded, please help me figure out what's happening. At the very least, Shania was an international superstar, and if anybody could find medical help for a mysterious illness, it was her. But to her dismay, the doctors wouldn't take her seriously. They claimed it was psychological, not physical. But Shania Twain didn't believe her illness was in her head. Things were going so good for her. She had just given birth to a beautiful baby boy. And while motherhood was difficult, it was also incredibly rewarding. What could she do? She had become a vocalist with no voice, a singer with no song. Shania Twain had no choice but to disappear completely from music. So depressed, she gave little explanation to fans. And honestly, what could she have told them? A strange curse had befallen her. They would have thought she was crazy, like Samson shorn of his power-granting locks. The temple of country music collapsed around her. A shocking betrayal. When Shania's baby was born, it was the happiest moment of her life. Part of that was because of her husband, who she adored. Her husband, Robert, better known as Mutt, was her partner in both life and music. Mutt was a producer, and the two had met in Nashville through music, continuing to collaborate throughout the years. Shania also had a best friend, Marie Ann, a woman who she had originally hired to manage one of her properties, but who had quickly transitioned to being one of her closest confidants. In short, Shania was surrounded by people she loved and trusted. But that was all about to change. One day, Shania got a call from Marie Ann's husband, Frederick, and he told her something shocking, something she didn't want to believe, that he had reason to believe that Mutt and Marie Ann were cheating with each other. Shania didn't believe him at first. She opened up to Marie Ann about it. And of course, she told Shania she was out of her mind. She even helped comfort the singer and offered to help her through the rough patch. Seriously, the gall of that woman. Shania called Frederick, who was by this point certain about the infidelity, even with hotel bills to prove it. And with the proof, the destruction of Shania's life was complete. A painful decision. Shania did the unthinkable. She quit. Fans were skeptical at first. How many musicians, annoyed by a momentary lull in their popularity, have pretended to quit in a desperate grab for attention, only to profit off that attention in just a few months?
Don't argue.
Shania said nothing about her voice troubles or her dirty dog of a husband.
It feels all hope is gone.
But still, the months turned into years. And in the blink of an eye, it had been 15 years since she had released a song or performed. Babies that were conceived in a fateful party for two when greatest hits dropped were now sullen teenagers.
I'm having a party.
But just when everybody least expected it, a shocking revelation shed new light on the mysterious circumstances of Shania's curse. Recovery. Years after Shania was struck by this mysterious curse, she had settled into her new post-music life. She had nearly forgotten what it was like to transfix an audience of thousands with her golden voice. At this point, it had been 7 years since her life had completely changed. when, on a whim, she decided to try a new doctor. It couldn't hurt, right? She expected to hear what she had heard a million times before, that there was no obvious physical explanation for the problem. But this time, something happened as the doctor was reading her test results. Shania saw him raise a brow, and this was unexpected, as he said, quote, "Have you ever heard of a thing called Lyme disease?" Shania was skeptical. While she was never a stranger to the outdoors, she wasn't exactly Bear Grylls either. But the doctor told her she tested positive for the disease, and that the symptoms closely aligned with hers, her lost voice. This was what the doctor called dysphonia. It could be the reason behind the nerve damage. Shania didn't quite know how to feel. On the one hand, she was aware of the life-threatening illness, but she was also aware she may never get her voice back. On the other, she had confirmation that it wasn't a curse, and it wasn't in her head. Now, she just had to decide what to do. Back in the limelight. If you can imagine, Shania desperately wanted to re-enter the world of music, but she didn't know if it was even possible. She began getting treatment for her voice, and it did return somewhat, but it wasn't quite as powerful as it was in her glory days. But then something happened that once again turned her life upside down. After Shania heard the devastating news that her husband had betrayed her, she didn't know where to turn. The only person she knew who had experienced what she had, a spouse betraying her with a very close friend, was Anne-Marie's husband, Frederick. So she reached out to him, and the two began spending time together. And honestly, this is wild because they enjoyed each other's company so much that they were married in 2011 in a quite magical ceremony in Puerto Rico. Shania found that her whole life had become more meaningful now. And with the momentum, she decided to return to music, knowing that even if she failed, she knew she had a faithful lover now to back her up.
You better show me a Jesus.
That year, she released her first single since her disappearance and played a smattering of shows.
Any man of mine better walk.
It took her some time to regain confidence in the studio and also on stage, but gradually she became stronger and more capable. In 2015, she decided to do one more tour, and it was a smashing success.
Right out of this world.
So, in 2017, she released a new album entitled Now. So, releasing new music, happily married to a faithful husband, and raising kids, Shania Twain is back, baby.
Let's go, girls.
Just look at her on stage at Harry Styles' set at Coachella. She looks vibrant, she looks happy. And we are so happy Shania Twain is back.
I'm kind of lost for words. I'm a bit starstruck. What can I say?
Her whole career, in a way, is one big contradiction. While she's always been appreciated by her fans and most people around the world because of her iconic stage presence, songwriting abilities, and raw musical talent, those are precisely the reasons that haters criticize her for being unserious or too popular. But few musicians have endured the disrespect and trouble that Shania has. But somehow, Shania Twain has found a way to keep pushing through all the BS. Even after everything, Shania Twain is still the one. Alright, enough of me, now it's your turn to get in the comments and tell me your favorite Shania Twain song, her best album. Has anyone out there seen her perform live? What do you think about her dirtbag ex-husband? Get in the comments and tell me all things Shania Twain. And before you go, please hit the thumbs up icon if you don't mind, it really helps. Subscribe to our channel and come back often so we can keep telling you what happened? Tim McGraw's known in the business for having it all. Platinum hits, one of the most successful tours of all time, a beautiful wife who's also a country legend, and a respected and prolific acting career. It's enough to make a guy wonder, what am I doing with my life?
I need you.
Never mind, don't worry about it. Sit back and relax, because you just might find out that behind every picture-perfect life is another side of the story. And Tim McGraw's life is no different. From his mysterious, dramatic childhood to his current celebrity lifestyle, there's a lot to uncover about Tim you might not expect from the singer's glossy public image. So today we're looking at the true story of Tim McGraw,
Bust your back and take it for free.
including all the details they don't want you to know. Hidden families, drunken rampages, and over-the-top luxury. We're telling you the secret life of Tim McGraw.
That's where your journey starts.
And it's chock full of juicy details you don't want to miss.
With a lot of life before me.
So strap up your cowboy boots and go fetch a 10-gallon hat, cause you ain't gonna wanna miss today's episode. But first, remember to like and subscribe. Our channel regularly puts out videos about stars like Tim, so be sure to stay tuned to find out. What happened? Living a lie. Tim McGraw wasn't always Tim McGraw. He grew up as Tim Smith. But that is not the most exciting name I've ever heard, as my name is also Tim Smith. He lived a normal life with his parents in Louisiana, his mother a waitress and his dad a cowboy type. So Tim grew up riding horses before he could walk.
I guess that's just the cowboy in me.
And little Tim was a mischievous little kid. He enjoyed snooping around, and one day while he was poking through his mom's closet looking for Christmas presents, he didn't find any gifts, but he did find something that would forever change his life. It turned out that Tim had been living a lie. The boy uncovered his birth certificate, which said that his real name, of course, was Tim McGraw. Confused and upset, he went to his mother looking for answers, and what she told him blew his mind. In 1966, Tim's mother, Elizabeth Ann D'Agostino, was just a quiet high school student living with her family in Jacksonville, Florida. Elizabeth was a quiet girl who worked as a waitress to make ends meet. But then a new tenant moved into the apartment beneath hers, a troublemaker who was struggling to make ends meet as a minor league baseball player. This ball player was named Tug McGraw, and he took a liking to Elizabeth. He soon started making promises to the poor girl that he had no intentions of keeping, and a few months later, she was pregnant with his child. The second Tug heard the news, he was out of town, so her parents sent her to Louisiana to raise the child in the country. And sure, baseball players may not have the best reputations for being stand-up guys, but come on. And it turns out this was only the beginning. A pained relationship. Alright, rewind back to that moment when Tim found out that Smith wasn't his real name. Naturally, the boy wanted to meet his real father, so his mom agreed and took him to visit. That old minor league baseball player had actually become pretty successful, one of the league's very best pitchers, and he was living a superstar life in New York. Tim's mom took him to see his father pitch in Houston, which of course was a very anxious but exciting event. Tim was a big baseball fan and had his dad's baseball card. The boy wasn't looking for a handout, he was just excited to bond with his biological pops. And terribly, the scummy star refused to admit the kid was his, probably because he didn't want to pay child support. So Tim had to go home disappointed, but he would not give up.
Growing up, I was counting down.
The next year, he got his mom to arrange another trip to go see the pitcher again. This time, he was prepared and brought a Tug McGraw jersey and went right up to the bullpen and got his dad's attention. But the superstar clearly had no interest in being a decent human being. And once again, he ignored him. And this was the breaking point for Tim McGraw. He never again tried to reach out to his dad, and ended up growing up dirt poor with his mom in Louisiana. It wasn't until Tim turned 18 that his dad claimed he was his son. And once he did acknowledge him, Tim could have very well shunned the guy. I mean, he refused to claim him for nearly 2 decades. But Tim didn't have it in him to be angry. He said at the very least, knowing that he had a famous dad motivated him to be a big star too. And he said if his dad wanted to be greedy, that was fine. Tim knew he was capable of being more than successful, to be a better man than his dad ever was. Tug McGraw had his own family by this time with several young kids. And we want to know what you think here. Do you think Tug McGraw was a scumbag for abandoning him? Or was it just what he had to do to follow his dreams? Do you agree with Tim taking the high road? Or do you think he should have said some very choice words? A drunken rampage. Being such a huge star, it probably doesn't surprise you to find out that Tim hangs out with some other huge stars too. I mean, he did marry one, so it didn't seem like a big deal when Tim was hanging out with fellow country star and close pal Kenny Chesney in Buffalo, New York. But nobody could have expected the disaster that ended up happening, and the consequences followed them for years. It all started after the two country stars performed at the George Strait Country Music Festival. The show itself knocked the audience's socks off, and the two were riding high with that special energy you only feel after a killer performance. It's also possible that some intoxicants were involved too, as the two were out looking for more excitement. When they approached police officers on their mounted horses, they asked if they could ride them. The cops must have been country fans because they said, sure, go ahead, instead of hitting them in the knees. But Kenny Chesney decided to embrace his outlaw image that day. Maybe he thought he was above the law, or maybe he was just pissed drunk.
The car broke down.
Either way, Kenny said F the police and decided to ride away, playing a game of Grand Theft Horsey.
On the RCA, no AC in the vents.
Tim could have talked his friend down or tried to remove himself from the situation, but since the singer was always ride or die with his friends, when the two cops ran over to remove Kenny from the horse, Tim leapt into action too and threw one of the officers into a chokehold. After the dust settled, Tim found himself being charged with assaulting a police officer, which in the state of New York is a felony.
Till you walked into my life.
It honestly seemed like Tim's career and family, everything he had worked so hard to build, was in jeopardy. Even if he ended up being found guilty of a misdemeanor, he could serve a year in prison, an entire year being separated from his family, his career, and music.
Like freedom down a dirt road.
So the case went to trial, right? And of course there were probably a few country fans on the jury because they acquitted the two stars of all charges. But maybe Tim will think twice before he plays cowboys with his friend Kenny Chesney. A shocking lifestyle. Tim has made a career out of singing relatable songs to the average Joe, and I for one believe he has earned it.
She was killing me in that mini skirt.
We know the boy grew up dirt poor in the rural South while his father was making millions as a pitcher. But in real life, it turns out that Tim, along with his wife, singer Faith Hill, do things a little different than the rest of us. In fact, you may not believe the kind of life the two live. Both Tim and Faith made their careers as successful touring artists. The couple even paired up for one of the most successful musical tours of all time.
Just tell something to me.
And the thing about touring is that it's not exactly luxurious. If you're not a superstar, you're probably sleeping in a van. And even if you're a big name, it is exhausting to be on the road day after day. That's why it may shock you to learn that when they're not on the road,
Like a needle needs a vein.
Tim and Faith like to stay somewhere you would not believe. They own an entire private island in the Bahamas, and it is gorgeous. Their island has miles of pristine beach, and Tim and his wife built a massive multi-million-dollar house. Heck, it's not even a house. It's 8 different houses that are all connected. Of course, they employ a huge team of people that live year-round on the island. We're talking gardeners, maids, construction workers for when they want to build another room or another house. I guess growing up dirt poor, you may expect Tim to live kind of quiet still, but whether he keeps the noise down, he is living his life to the fullest on his own private island.
I got a proud blow.
Tim McGraw isn't your average country singer.
End of my rainbow.
Just maintaining a normal career is hard enough for most musicians.
Hanging by the
the door.
And Tim has gone above and beyond that standard. So what do you think? Are you impressed by the story you've heard? Are you a fan of his acting performances in The Blind Side?
I love that one.
And Flicka? And finally, tell me your favorite Tim McGraw songs. What's his best album? Who has seen him live? Get in the comments and let me know. If you enjoyed our deep dive, give the video a thumbs up, it really helps a lot. Subscribe to the channel and come back often so we can keep telling you what happened?
She had to ride the heat of passion like a comet burning bright.
You might think you know Garth Brooks pretty well. I think most country music fans do, but by some measures, he's more popular than the Beatles. Yeah, those Beatles. Garth is the only artist in music history to have released 9 albums that all achieved diamond status in the United States. The Beatles only managed 6. Pfft, pathetic. But Garth Brooks wasn't always the worldwide superstar he is today. In fact, every part of Garth's life, his youth, his family, his early career, had its moments where everything seemed to be on the verge of toppling down. What's happening? W.H. Stratton here, and put on your cowboy hat, strap on your boots, and get ready to dig for some deep cuts as we learn the secret history of Garth Brooks. Make sure you smash that thumbs up icon to show us support, and subscribe to the channel so you can always find out what happened. A long road to success. Garth Brooks grew up in Yukon, Oklahoma in the 1960s and 70s, the youngest of 6 kids. A common question for Garth, is that really his first name? The answer, no, but it is his name. He was born Troyal Garth Brooks, named after his father on February 7th, 1962 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His parents obviously thought one weird name wasn't enough, so they got him 2. Garth's family was well acquainted with dreams of musical stardom. His mother, Colleen, did a short stint recording for Capitol Records in the 50s, and was on the popular country music show Ozark Jubilee for some time. Quite naturally, Garth learned music from his mother, father, and older brother too, and the young boy was playing like a pro in no time. But given that Colleen never made it big, it's no surprise that Garth never planned to be a professional musician. His father, Troyal, was a former Marine who served in Korea, as well as a Golden Gloves boxing champion. Garth's relationship with his dad was never touchy-feely. His old man was harsh with the kids, even harsh enough to instill fear. But Garth maintains that his father's severe discipline was necessary to keep him in line. If being a musical whiz wasn't enough, Garth was also a star at sports. Which ones? Well, all of them apparently. He excelled at football, baseball, and track and field. And when the time came to go to college, he had plenty of options, ending up attending Oklahoma State on a track scholarship. Still, Garth couldn't run away from music. At nights, he worked as a bouncer at a local bar and formed his own band, Santa Fe, learning to play whatever the college audience wanted. When he graduated college in 1984, he did so with a strong belief that he could be successful as a country musician. The only problem was the world didn't seem to agree quite yet. Undeterred, he married his college sweetheart, Sandy, and moved to Nashville, the place to try and break into the music scene. Life here was not easy for the newlyweds. At one point, they lived in a tiny house in Hendersonville, Tennessee, along with 5 guys, 2 wives, an infant, a dog, and a cat. Most country musicians wear cowboy boots, but Garth went a step further. To make ends meet, he and his wife worked in a store selling them too. For a few years, things weren't looking good, and Garth didn't have a lot of options. In college, he focused on sports and music, so his career prospects were now limited. But just in time, the country gods decided to finally smile on him, when an executive who had already rejected Garth heard him perform once again at the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville. He decided to give him a second chance. Just a few years later, he was selling millions of records. But success in music doesn't mean everything. In fact, Garth's success would soon become his biggest enemy, threatening on several occasions to dissolve the bonds between him and his most loved ones. A second chance at love or an illicit affair. In 1987, Garth was just 3 years out of college, married to his first wife, and living in Nashville trying to make it big. It was at this time that he met Trisha Yearwood. Of course, we know Trisha today as one of the biggest country stars out there, but at the time, she was in the same boat as Garth, struggling to make a name of herself in the cutthroat Nashville music scene. The two met in a recording studio. Garth tells the story here.
You meet somebody. Kent Blasey introduced me and Miss Yearwood, and he goes, "I knew you were gonna like her when she left." He goes, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, it's strange because I felt that feeling like when you just meet your wife, but I'd been married for 13 months."
It's obvious now that the two make a charismatic pair, and Garth still says that nothing happened between them until he and Sandy divorced. But it's not very obvious that that's the truth. Look at this tense exchange from that same interview where Ellen asked the question we're all thinking.
What is it? Was it like a gradual thing, or was it all of a sudden one day you're like, wait a minute?
Do you really want to get into this?
I
mean,
do.
That's, really?
I really do.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Okay.
why not?
All right.
Now, what happened between them is still murky. We may never know for sure. Did the star-studded couple cheat with each other while they were still married? Or could there have been an emotional bond that didn't quite cross the line until it was appropriate? Rumors of a secret affair between the two have always followed them. But rumors, of course, are not always true. Longtime fans of the couple might deny they would ever do anything so risky. But there is one shocking piece of information that suggests differently. In 1989, Sandy discovered that Garth was cheating on her. Not with Trisha, but with another unknown woman. This event threatened to topple Garth's entire family not long after it had begun. Sandy, justifiably enraged, threatened to divorce her husband. So what did Garth do? Either the fear of losing his then wife really shook him, or he was a fantastic actor. At a show in Missouri, he got so choked up on stage he had to restart a song. But the temporary peace did not last forever, and some years later, Garth ended up with Trisha Yearwood. Family or career? Country music stars are no strangers to the strain that constant touring can deal out. But more than most, Garth has dealt with the tension between singing songs about love and love in real life. His first daughter, Taylor Maine Pearl, was born in the same place his country music career began, Nashville. But by now, Garth was already a high-profile star, with millions of records sold and just as many obsessed fans across the world. You'd think that on a day as important as her birth, fans and the media would give Garth and the family a little privacy, right? You couldn't be more wrong. The paparazzi didn't stop at taking pictures outside the hospital and constantly bugged his press secretary. They made it into the building itself, so aggressive that 2 Tennessee state troopers had to guard the room. But the trouble did not stop there. Garth once more found himself in a tough spot when his mother, Colleen, such a vital piece of inspiration, passed away. And then his marriage with Sandy ended in disaster. Brooks realized the only people he had left were his daughters. But then something simple and remarkable happened that shook up his entire life. While spending time with his family, he noticed his daughters were pronouncing the word both like their nanny did. This one word made him realize he was not involved in his daughters' lives. He had to make a choice, either give up his career or his children. And I have to say, I don't know what most people would do in that situation. You have to remember, at this point in his career, Garth had sold 100 million albums in the United States and was set to sell many more. But the lessons that Garth's father instilled in him about the importance of sacrifice and dedication seemed to kick in, because he made a drastic choice to retire from music until his daughters turned 18. Being a more dedicated father was harder than Garth expected. When he tried to make family dinners, he realized he barely knew how to cook boxed mac and cheese. But he and Sandy tried hard to make the arrangement work. And they invested in regular family dinners, even after Garth married Trisha in 2005. It took a while for Garth's daughters to get used to the arrangements. His daughter Taylor was so upset by his marriage to Trisha, she would catch tarantulas and put them in plastic bags in the freezer to frighten her. But finally, after years of difficulty, it seemed that everything had worked out for Garth Brooks. For a time at least. Behind the shiny lives of superstars like Garth and Trisha often lies a mountain of heartbreak, disappointment, struggle, and basic humanity. Here's hoping nothing but sunshine lays in front of Garth and his family from here on out. So let's discuss. Do you think Garth Brooks did the right thing retiring until his daughters were grown? Do you believe he cheated on his first wife with Trisha? And finally, give me some Garth Brooks recommendations. Best songs, best albums, I want them all. Before you go, please smash that thumbs up icon for us. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you can come back and we can tell you